I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Bound Sisters. They are a captivating book club podcast hosted by three dynamic sisters. Kellye, a stay-at-home mom with a passion for interior design, Jill, a skilled surgical technologist who enjoys sharing her creativity through crocheting and painting, and Myranda, a dedicated theater technician who delights in collecting and reading books in her free time. Join these engaging sisters every month as they come together amidst their busy lives to delve into the world of literature, offering unique perspectives and lively discussions on their chosen monthly books. It's a delightful blend of family, diverse interests, and the love of storytelling. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
We were just chatting before we got on here. We have had a relationship going on Instagram, and so I'm so excited to bring it out into this, as we were laughing, real world, where we're meeting on Zoom to all meet together today. So, well, let's start actually with, why don't you guys tell us about your podcast?
Myranda and I kind of decided just one day that we were going to do it, and we kind of dragged Kellye along with us.
Of course.
But I really enjoy it because I wanted to do I wanted to be a part of a book club for a long time, and I just don't have really a lot of extra time in my schedule to meet up with people. And so the idea of a podcast and just kind of being able to do it on your own time, really appeals to me. And the thing that I like the most is you don't have to read the same book we're reading that month. I mean, we've been doing it for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So you can go back and pick any book that we've read and read it yourself. And then, listen to the podcast and listen to our thoughts about it. And if you have same thoughts, different thoughts, whatever, you can kind of be, obviously not really with us discussing it, but in your mind, kind of having more thoughts beyond just reading the book.
And I think that's a great point, because I sometimes will finish a book and I'm like, okay, who out in the ether has read this book? Because there are things you want to talk about, especially if it ends on a cliffhanger or you didn't quite understand certain points. And so I love that we could read the books that you have read, again, in our own time, like you said, because I feel that life is so busy. But then I could come back and I could listen to your podcast, and maybe that would help me understand or answer some questions I might have had about it.
Well, and I think too, we haven't had a lot of experience with this yet. We're still kind of new. But I think it would be fun, if people had read the book and had listened to the podcast, to have a discussion, in the comments, oh, I really like this part of the book, or, oh, this part really confused me, or this part was really weird. I think that would be kind of fun to kind of engage with the community that way too.
Yeah, I've had those similar thoughts too of how to create this community. And I think something I've noticed, I think especially starting in 2020, right, is when we started isolating ourselves. I think now people are wanting to get back in community with people and navigating the busyness of life and all the tasks you have on hand, or in my case, sometimes childcare, even just being able to leave the house to be able to go do something in community. But having even online discussions about similar books you're reading can be a great way. Just figuring out how to navigate to do that, though, is a challenge.
I was, since you brought up 2020, I was thinking about that this morning because we started summer of 2022. So coming right out of the pandemic, I feel like it was a time to find community online where you can connect with more people from your home. And so it's kind of where we were coming from.
Yeah. I think it really made apparent, right, of how isolated we had been for so long. And again, for good reason, but just how to navigate creating and crossing those bridges again to make community.
Plus, Myranda up and moved away, so there was.
And I decided to move states.
Yeah.
So.
And I was talking to someone recently about Alaska, and she was saying it's no easy feat to get out of Alaska either, right? I mean, so I guess this would be a good point, is why don't we talk about a little bit who you are? Because listeners, I know they two of the sisters live in Alaska, but you do not know that yet. So, but like, it's just how many hours is it like on the flight just to get down into Washington, let's say, into the States?
It takes about, well, there it's 4 hours. Back to Washington, it's about, 3 to 3.5 hours. So it's not the worst flight in the world, but it's definitely not fun.
Yeah, but then I'm imagining like
anywhere other than Washington.
Yes.
It's like 6 hours, 12 hours. So
yeah,
I used to live in New Jersey, and it was a full day of travel to get from New Jersey back to Alaska. So
yeah, that's what I was envisioning, right? It's like you get down into Washington, but then you have to go connect to somewhere else in the US, and it would be your whole day of travel.
Yeah.
Okay, well, who would like to start with who they are?
I think Kellye should go first. She's the oldest.
Okay, perfect.
Miranda's always like, in order of age. Okay, well, I stay at home. My kids are both in school, and so I'm a stay-at-home wife, mom, whatever. Insert title here. I do that.
Yeah. Biggest job in the world. I do the same.
I have for a really long time enjoyed working on my house. So it started, we bought our first condo when we first married in 2006, and I redid that place and had to rent for a little while, so I didn't get anything. And so when we moved back here, I basically redid my entire house from top to bottom, the last house that we did. Wow. And then now we're in this house, so I'm just kind of slowly trying to put my own spin on things here. I've always really loved reading. I think I really got into it when I was a new mom. And we lived on a military base and didn't really know anybody. And I had a friend here who had recommended a couple of book series to me. And so I started reading those, and I just kind of didn't stop. So that's kind of.
Yeah, I always say it saved my sanity when I was a new mom, right? When you're like chained to the couch feeding the baby, or the baby fell asleep on you. I always had a table of books right there, and then I would just grab the book, and at least I could transport myself to another world. I might not have been able to transport out of my couch, but I could go to another world and in a book, and it saved my mental sanity.
Bizarre, because you just you get so engrossed in the story and you just want more and more. And then when you're out of the story, it almost feels like reality is not your reality. And so I'm like, oh, I'm not really a new mom. I'm really this awesome, fighting woman who's battling for the goodness of mankind,
Yeah. But... Dragon Slayer at night. Okay. All right. Well, and then who's next? I don't know the order of the sisters here, so I'm learning something today.
I guess that's me. I'm also a mom, and so I work at a hospital as a surgical technologist. So I'm the one that sets up your OR and makes sure your doctor has all your supplies and stuff. And then I get to scrub in and do surgery, which is so fun.
Wow.
And then in my free time, I do probably just about every craft under the sun. But I really love crocheting and painting. And mostly my husband and I love doing those online paint classes just on YouTube, Bob Ross or something like that, and we'll paint together. But yeah, that's kind of what I spend my time doing. Either I'm at work or being a mom, or I'm crafting something.
Are your kids young? How old are your kids?
They range from almost 11 to almost 2.
Okay. I was wondering if they had taken up any crafts yet, if they were old enough.
They like to paint with me, but yeah, they do, your typical kid. They'll color or cut up paper or something like that, but yeah, that's about all they've gotten into so far.
Yeah. Maybe you'll rub off on them.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Everybody has their own interests. So
absolutely. Okay, and then Myranda, how about you?
I'm not a mom. I don't have any kids. But I'm a theater technician and I work with high schoolers, designing and building sets for them. And then I teach them how to build the sets and I work with them throughout their plays to make sure the play goes right and they're, safe operating these machines correctly. But so I spend a lot of time reading and dissecting plays, straight plays, musicals. Um, so I read a lot. And then I come home and I just kind of like dive into books and live there. And then I go back to work and I do it all over again. Um, but yeah, I love theater. I love telling stories. I love reading stories. My big thing that I do in theater is I paint, and I do carpentry.
Wow.
So I'm a carpenter, I'm a painter, and I love to read.
So as kids, did you have a very crafty home, I'm envisioning?
Yes, our mom, um, our mom's really big into like home crafts. So she makes like the wood cutouts that she paints and she sews stuff and
She
I
does a lot
think
of cross stitch.
Okay.
cross stitch, quilts. She made all of our wedding dresses.
Wow.
A few prom dresses.
Mhm.
That's amazing. That is one skill I wish my grandmother and my mom both sew. And I'm like, why didn't you teach me to sew? Like, it really was never handed down, but it is something that I feel like would translate so well into just being able to do a hem or something. I could do a button, but that's the extent of my sewing. So.
Yeah.
Buttons aren't easy, so I mean,
And I did get into cross stitch for like a hot second when we lived in Washington because I really, I didn't love being outside being wet and cold. And so I was like, I
Mhm.
need something inside the house. And so I picked up cross stitching. I had a neighbor that did it, and so she taught me. And so I did do that. But wow, that takes a long time and persistence.
I had to hand stitch some cushions for a play the other week and I was like, oh man, good thing I know how to do this. As I'm like working along, but
Yeah, it's amazing what you'll use, right? But I was just envisioning because each of you have some type of arts or crafts or creative side of your mind. It sounds like that if you had grown up like that. So, well, I have gotten so many book recommendations from you guys as well from following you on Instagram. So, why don't you tell our listeners how they can find you?
so we have multiple different social medias. I run Instagram and then Jill runs TikTok and Facebook. So those are the three places you can find us.
Okay.
Um, you can probably catch us easiest on Instagram and TikTok. It's kind of where we live.
Okay.
But so depending on the social media, depends on which sister you're talking to.
I love that you can like diversify that out though, right? Like you have a person to kind of manage each thing. Like you're not a one trick pony over here. Like me. Like sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't respond to that and that was 2 days ago. So
Yeah.
okay, so and then I know on Instagram it's at Bound Sisters, right? Is that what it is on other platforms or is it different there?
Yeah. So it's at Bound Sisters on all of our platforms.
Okay, perfect. Well, listeners, I will have that on our show notes, so you don't need to worry about writing that down. You can go click on there. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So we'll start in order. Kellye, you're going to get to start. Why don't you tell us what genres you love to read?
Kellye likes romance. So basically anything related to romance. Myranda, was it last week or the week before, put up this one of those story fill in the blank things. And it was like, what type of romance reader are you? And I think that I didn't like 3 of the like 27 things that were on there.
So you will read all kinds of romance.
Yeah,
Almost.
I am open to romance. So, I have read like fantasy. I really like that. Sometimes the fantasy can get a little bit complicated, which my brain doesn't follow complicated very easily. My husband likes to play board games, and he always tries to get these games that have like 1,000 rules, and I'm like, I'm not playing that. Um, so it's kind of the same way with books. If if there's like, I don't know, too many complicated things, my brain doesn't easily follow that. And so I like straightforward plot lines.
Yeah, not the elaborate world building. That could be intense.
Yeah, usually I skip over that. There's been books where I have skipped entire chapters because I just wasn't interested in that character's point of view.
Now we get to learn your secrets in reading.
I'm like, I've read 12 books this week. How did you do that? I only read half of it. It's fine.
Yeah. Still got the gist of the story, but
Exactly. What's important.
Okay, and then how in your day do you find time to read?
Usually when I'm in crunch mode and we're trying to get our book read for our podcast, I will listen to the book, not at 2.5 speed, but I could probably get to, I don't know, it's like 1.5, sometimes 1.7 speed. But mostly I like to read on my Kindle because it's easy to, it's easy access.
Yeah.
I have my phone with me all the time. But my husband gripes about it, but I do actually buy physical books of almost every book that I read.
Okay.
With boundaries. But typically I'll buy the physical book, I'll read the Kindle book, and then sometimes I'll listen to the audio book. So it just depends on what my week looks like at that moment in time.
Yeah. I'm impressed that you get all the copies of them.
My husband is not impressed. He's so unimpressed.
I'm sure he has things he collects too.
He does.
Yeah.
He does that.
Okay. And then what about you, Jill? What type of genres do you enjoy?
I'm more of like a thriller, not like a psychological thriller, but just like a nice little mystery in there, something that I'm trying to work out beyond just reading the page, the words on the page. I really like one of my favorite books that I've read in the last few years is called The Wife Upstairs, I believe.
Okay.
And it's really good. But
no more information than that.
it's a mystery, and it's got I don't know. Do you want me to summarize it?
You could, yeah. Entice us.
It's got a little bit of romance. And it's about a girl, and she meets this guy, and his wife is dead. And they live in this high society kind of, and everybody knows about the wife and how she passed and how much he loved her and all these things. And there's just some weird things that kind of go on in the background that this girl is now trying to like piece together of how this woman died, because they don't really talk about it. And yeah, you just kind of go through the journey with her as she's piecing all these things together.
Okay.
And I like those kind of things where there's kind of one person who doesn't know what's going on, and you're trying to work with them to put the clues together.
Yeah, see, I'm intrigued now. And thrillers is not a genre I generally read because I read at night, and so I'm always afraid I'm going to be scared, because I have read some thrillers that are maybe more psychological thrillers, or they kind of creep me out, and then I feel like I can't sleep, or I dream about it at night. And so admittedly, this is a genre I would love to explore more, but I also am like, how do I pick the ones that won't keep me up at night?
Yeah, I don't try to focus on like horror necessarily. Sure. But more like suspenseful.
Okay.
And yeah, they're not too bad. There's some good light ones out there that you're just kind of chugging along with this person.
Yeah, this sounds like this could be one, so I'm gonna add this to my list of thrillers to try.
Say like Nancy Drew, but more grown up.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. So, and then how in your busyness do you find time to read?
I listen to my audiobooks at 2.5. The key is you have to buy the physical copy or the Kindle copy. You have to have the words in front of you, and then you can listen to it at a higher speed, and your brain processes the audio while visualizing the words, so you understand what is happening, and you can fly through a book in a day.
Wow. Okay, so this is like speed reading training here, essentially.
Miranda called it just downloading the book to your brain.
Yeah. It's a perfect way to put it there.
Yeah, it's a great way to just devour a book.
Yeah, so sometimes I do listen to my audiobooks at a higher speed. Do you guys find that you remember them as well? Though, like if someone asked me 6 months from now about a book that I maybe listened to a little bit faster, I'm like, oh, I know I read it, but I couldn't tell you a thing about it. Do you guys have that?
That's why you have to have the words in front of you.
Yeah, which I haven't
I was
tried.
gonna say I do that with physical books too. I'm just like, I don't remember,
Yeah.
but it was good.
Let me check my Goodreads is normally what I'll say. Be like, I'll check Goodreads and then I'll see, oh yeah, I read that, but it was a year ago. I couldn't tell you unless it was a story that really stuck with me or I thought about and resonated with for a long time after. But other times I'm like, oh gosh, I don't remember. I rated it this many stars. So
I don't know why.
I had somebody at work the other day, they found out that I do a book-based podcast, and they were like, oh, like, what have you read? And I just kind of looked at them and I was like, yeah, I read. Like, I have read books before, but yeah, I don't know. I don't remember which one.
It's so true though. Those like blanks in your memory. You're like, I swear I read it and I'm smart, but nothing is coming to mind right now.
Yeah, if I have a title to go with it, like I can usually remember something about it at least. But if you just ask me like, what's a good book I should read? I'm like, I don't know. So
my issue with book recommendations is I've had this discussion with Myranda. Like I read a lot of like, romance. And so I'm like, I don't know how comfortable they are with certain things that sometimes come with reading romance novels.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I default to like Outlander, which is an amazing story. And I love it. But I think sometimes I default to just like my super favorites because a lot of the good books that I've read, I'm not sure if it's gonna sit well with the general audience.
Yeah, I think that goes to like to know, how much you know the person as well. Because I know my all-time favorite book is definitely more of a women's fiction book. So my brother-in-law recently asked me like, hey, he was in town. Do you have any book recommendations? I'm thinking, well, I can't, that would be not a book I would recommend you, but what's more like in the manly category of what I would recommend you. And so again, I think it just maybe depends on the level you know the person. And I think, to your point of like, do they like spiciness in their books or not? So
I started a Google Drive because of that, because I had friends asking me for recommendations. And so I just started this group Google Drive where I would put in the title, what I rated it, and then like spiciness, and then any notes that I wanted to put next to it so that they can like go through. They were like, this is just our TBR now. I was like, okay. So they could go through and decide like what was right for them based off of my recommendations.
That's a great idea. I have grandiose plans that I would do more than like entering in Goodreads with just my rating, but inevitably to go and write about every book I read, right? That would take it's a lot of time and commitment that I just am not sure I have. So I like rely on my memory to be like, well, okay, what could I tell this person if I do recommend it? And then of course we get into the weeds of what we said before of like, well, I can't even remember the book from 6 months ago, but
I don't even remember to enter into Goodreads. Honestly, I just am like, next book.
I use it because I like to try to track my books in the year. So that's my motivation is like my book goal of the year, my personal book goal. So got to check it off for that reason. All right, Myranda, well, why don't you tell us what genres you enjoy?
I also read romance. I generally read fantasy romance, but I like contemporary romance for like a palate cleanser. But my favorite genres are YA and NA novels. Specifically, I like big series. So some of my favorite series are like 16 books universes. Just because like Kellye was saying with fantasy, you get into you have to learn all about the world building and magic systems and like politics. And so I like just living in a world that I understand. And you can just jump between the different characters that are all living in this world and you don't have to go through and learn all those new things every time you start a book. So I live within those like huge series of books.
I actually was thinking, as you were talking about how you read a lot of plays and musicals, but then you come home and read books. And I was thinking, I wonder if what you read in your world is different enough from what you're doing day to day. So that way you can continue, because I feel like our brains get tired, right, of a certain type of content as well. I don't know if you guys experience that. So, but I imagine that these like big world building fantasy series that you read is different enough from like what you're doing in your day job.
Yeah, well, so in my day job, I've done Little Women twice. And sometimes I'm like, maybe I should read Little Women. But I'm like, well, I don't really want to because I just did that at work. I want to, I want to come home and read about dragons and warriors and
like you have to differentiate the two, I think, to have the brain power and capacity to continue to read in the evening, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how do you find time to, well, it sounds like at the end of your day, but how do you find time to read in your world?
Yes. So I generally start my day with a coffee and a book. And I'll read for an hour or so. My job takes place at night. So I have a lot of morning free time. But if I'm not working at night, I'll also read in the evening. And then my job takes up my entire life. I pull like 13-hour shifts constantly. But so my job a lot of times we'll stand around. We're like, well, it's time to hurry up and wait. Because you're there for 13 hours, but you do 20 seconds of work. So I have the Kindle app on my phone. And so like if I'm just standing around waiting to do a thing, I'll pop open a book and start reading. So there's weeks at work where I'm like going through 3 or 4 books in a week because I'm just like standing at work and then Myranda, do your thing. Okay. And then I go back to my book. And then, so I just have a book in my pocket and constantly pulling it out and reading it.
Okay. And then with having such varied tastes among you all, how do you choose your books for the podcast?
Just kind of choose what we want. This year we have like a format that we have to follow. So, which is hard for me because I don't break out very often. I think my next book I have to choose is a memoir. I'm like, I don't even know how to do that.
There's got to be romantic memoirs.
I mean, there has to be, right? Somewhere. Let's Google it. But that's what we're doing this year. But the last couple of years, we just kind of, I really like this book. And then we have an ongoing just group text that never ends. And so we'll put in our ideas for books for that month. And then we'll kind of narrow it down between the 3 of us, which one sounds the best.
Okay. So just like you would any book club kind of is narrowing it down. That's how I run my local book club here is everybody brought ideas. And then if a lot of people had read it, I obviously got kicked out of the choices because we want to try to read something not everyone has read. But then we just would go based off like the blurb and like what sounded interesting to us for that month.
Or like the book cover.
Yeah. We have had quite a few memoir shows on Bookish Flights, so I can send you over the books that have been recommended on the show. Because that was part of the reason why I started my podcast was because of the so little time factor of I want to explore other genres. I have my ones I live in, but I want to try other things, and particularly fantasy was the whole impetus was like, I want to try the fantasy genre. I don't have a ton of time. I want to recommend it, a trusted source to recommend me the fantasy books I should try to see if I could really give it a shot. And that's how Bookish Flights came about. So it was really that was like, just tell me what I should read and recommend it and sell me on it. So, well, you guys have also been so gracious to bring a book flight on the show today. So can you tell us
3?
Yeah, we got the 3. So can you tell me a little bit how you guys chose them or picked what you were going to talk about today?
I think because we have such a wide variety of genres that we each like, fantasy was kind of the one that we've all at least read a couple times. So, and I think we read a lot of fantasy on our podcast. So it just ended up being the genre that we picked.
Wonderful. I'm excited because this is now a genre that I think it like usurped historical fiction was always my go-to. And last year I read so much fantasy and I loved it that I'm like, I just want to keep rolling with this. I do like fantasy. So my Bookish Flights podcast experiment worked. All right. Well, I have Dark Fever as the first book written down on the book flight. So is that you, Kellye?
That's me.
Okay. All right. Tell us about it.
It's the first book in a series. It's kind of one of those universe type things. It's not quite as complicated as like an ACOTAR situation, but it's by an author. Her name is Karen Marie Moning. I read it first when I think my now 13-year-old son was 1. So it's a series that's been around for a while. There's 11 books.
Okay.
But basically it's this girl, Michaela Lane. Her sister went on a trip to Ireland and then never came home. So she goes looking for her. She gets this cryptic message on her phone from her. And so she goes to try and figure out what happened to her sister. And then she meets this guy. His name is Jericho Behrens. He owns a bookstore. And it's kind of like a Grumpy Sunshine situation. And he kind of, I guess, guides her reluctantly through this world of fae and danger and all of these things, these monsters and all of this stuff, because he actually is super interested in the thing that happened to her sister.
Okay.
And so, but kind of the thread through the whole series is Mac is what they shorten her name to. Mac and Behrens, their kind of love story. There's some offshoots of couples, and then there's the whole end of the world situation that so Michaela kind of turns into this warrior woman under the care of Behrens, who is now her love interest. Okay. So I don't know, I really liked the whole story. I liked the dynamic between the two main characters. And then there's another series that kind of like loops in toward the 3rd or 4th book. It's her Highlander series. It's also kind of time travel-y, magic-y situation. And so you kind of meet those characters later on in the Fever series.
Okay. I have not heard of this book, so I'm very intrigued. Is the series complete now then, or is she still writing books in the series?
I think it's complete. I actually haven't read the entire series because we moved, and then like I just lost my bearings.
Sure.
And so I think I've read up to the 7th book, and there's 11 books in the series. So I actually just need to finish the series. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a great little story.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed it.
All right. It's going on my list. Okay, so that was Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moning. And then Moning, is that how I say that? Moning. Okay. All right. And then the second book we have here is Memory Thief. So who is that one?
That's Jill. That's me.
You guys even submitted in order. Look at this.
That's Myranda.
Yeah, I think Myranda organized that. So this one, I had to like pull it up to like remember what it is. But so it's Memory Thief by Laura Mancy. And it's a little, it's fantasy. It's got a little bit of romance to it. It's got a little bit of dystopia to it. And it's just about this girl in this world that they use memory as like currency. And you can just kind of, there's like people who can just take your memories through touch. And her mom is sick, and the ruler is like going to auction off her memories, the mother's memories. And so the story kind of follows this girl as she's trying to save her mom, and she has to kind of reconnect excuse me, she has to reconnect with a group of rebels that she's kind of sworn off to help save her mom. So yeah, pretty good.
See, this is what I find so amazing about authors is when you said, oh, they can steal memories with touch. I'm like, that's such a cool concept. Like, how did they come up with these things?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're a little bit scared that authors come up with certain things. You're like, who hurt you?
Yeah.
I say that about a lot of books that I read, since I read so many like thrillers and crime things, and I'm like, somebody just sat in a room and thought about all of this. Like,
Yes. Yeah. And then you wonder how dark their brain is. So, okay. And then is this a series or is it a standalone book?
I think it's just a standalone book. I haven't read any more beyond this.
Okay.
If it is a series, I haven't looked into it. So this was just one that I found at the bookstore, and it looked good, and I picked it up. So
Yeah. Did the cover draw you in?
yeah, it's got lots of little swirly designs, and so it's one that I've heard around social media a little bit too. Which kind of, once I saw it, could like help me pick it up. So
Yeah. Well, listeners, this is what I love about the Bound Sisters, because I've been introduced to so many books by you guys. I'm like, I haven't even heard of this one, but it sounds really intriguing. So, okay, so that was The Memory Thief by Lauren Manzi. And then Myranda, what did you bring us today?
I brought The Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. So Cassandra Clare is one of my top favorite authors. So I had a hard time with learning how to read when I was younger. And then I got really into Twilight, and I read that series like 5 times in a row. And then my dad said, you need to try something else. So Cassandra Clare was kind of like another author that helped me kind of move on and continue reading. The Clockwork Angel is the first one that I read by her, and it's about a girl named Tessa Gray, and it's set in the early 1800s, I believe. And she travels from America to England to go live with her brother, but when she gets off the boat, she gets captured by these warlock witches ladies, and they like unlock these powers in her, and they're not nice. And then she gets rescued by, I believe it's pronounced Nephilim. It's half angel, half human,
Okay.
kind of like warrior people. So the book is about her not only learning about this new world, but her powers and trying to save her brother. So this is the first book in a 3-book series, a trilogy, and then it's also a part of a larger universe. So there's 16 other books ranging between the 1800s to today, and it's about all of these different people who live within this kind of like half angel, half human society, and they're like the different journeys they all go on, and they're usually each character kind of like pops up and makes cameos in different books and things like that. So
this is another impressive thing about authors is how do they keep track of all these things to write 16 books in this universe? And so cool.
I imagine they have like
the
the strings going everywhere on a wall with all the
they
characters.
probably have a murder board.
Yeah. You'd have to have an entire room dedicated by book 16 to just keeping track of the series.
Yeah, because you know the readers are gonna find those little mistakes, like, oh, that didn't add up right there.
Yeah, or so-and-so's interest wasn't coffee, it was tea, or just something so simple as that, of like making your characters and who they are, the character arc of them, but then translating into 16 books of stories. It's impressive.
Yeah. Probably have like a trusted group of people that you're like, okay, I need you to vet this book for me.
Yeah. Be my reader and make sure I got it all correct.
Yep.
So would that be considered like historical fantasy?
Kind of.
Okay.
They don't really interact very much with what's actually going on in society at the time. They're just kind of,
set in that.
She's fighting in a dress.
Okay.
So
I had someone come on and they did a historical fantasy book flight, which really intrigued me because, like I said, historical fiction was always my go-to. And I'm like, oh, I could tie in that. And because I love it because I can learn about different time periods or places that, I mean, maybe I heard about in school, but it definitely didn't internalize into the mind. But I feel like when I read it in a story, it really makes history come to life. And so I feel like I'm learning at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been very intrigued since this episode of historical fantasy that I'm like, oh, well, maybe that could like fit the same, check the box for me of learning about something, but reading a really great story at the same time.
Yeah.
You're multitasking.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that I mean, I've always loved learning. It's not that I read to like feel like this need of like, oh, I need to keep learning, but I love that part of it. So I wanted to ask you guys earlier and I forgot, did you guys grow up as readers? Like, did you read books together when you were kids?
No, I can't think.
I was gonna say we didn't really grow up together.
Okay.
Okay, well, I had a different thought.
Okay, Jill and I shared a room for a couple of years, but
I shared a room for a couple of years too.
But
I didn't grow up with Kellye.
Okay. All right, because I was again like wondering if that translated from childhood to your love of reading now.
So like for age gaps, Kellye is 6 years older than me, and Myranda is 5 years younger than me.
Okay, all right.
So there's a pretty major gap between Kellye to Myranda, but yeah, Myranda and I used to share a bedroom when we were younger, and so when I would read at night, she would often ask me to just read it out loud. And so I would do that. And I remember actually one time I got in trouble because Myranda had an ear infection. And so she had numbing drops in her ear. And so she couldn't hear very well. And she kept yelling that I wasn't reading. And I had to like scream, like it's nighttime. And I have to yell this book that I'm reading so that Myranda can hear it and go to bed.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I don't remember this.
I remember it because I was like, I am reading, and you were yelling to mom, and mom was yelling at me for not reading. And
oh my goodness, my 8-year-old reads to my 5-year-old right now because they share a room, and so this is what happens as well because she's not reading yet at 5. So he is reading out loud to her, not all the time, but it warms my mother heart of that they're sharing this love of reading together. So, well, how I love to end the show here is with bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions. So we can just answer these really quick. Are you a rereader? And we'll go in order. Kellye, you're up.
I think it depends on the book.
Okay. What about you, Jill?
no.
Okay. And then what about you, Myranda?
Same as Kellye. It depends on the book.
Okay.
If I really love the book.
Yeah. Go back and revisit. All right. Yeah. And then what is one book that has changed your life?
Kellye.
Life, that's huge. I think probably Outlander. I read when I was in my 20s. That probably affected my life for a really long time. I don't know if it would change my life, but
okay. It made an impact. Let's say that. It could be made an impact on you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. What about you, Jill?
I think Trumpeter's Swan is the first book that I can vividly remember as a kid of like sitting down and like, I want to read this book. And so that's really the book I credit to like kicking off my joy of reading.
We read that last year and all my kids loved it. They were all like, we all loved it. I loved it. They loved it. I didn't remember reading it as a kid, so it was so fun. All right. And then what about you, Myranda?
The most recent one is Corinne by Rebecca Morrow. It's just a book that I felt very seen and heard after reading. And I read it 8 times last year. So
I am so impressed. I am not a rereader myself, so that is impressive. Okay. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
For like our podcast?
Well, let's do individual and then you can tell us, we'll tie up with the podcast pick.
Well, currently I'm in the middle of, I read half of it, and so I went back and read the first half, and I'm going through it again. I'm the only one of us that actually reads like self-improvement books. But I'm reading You're a Badass.
Oh, yes.
By Jen, what's her name?
Sincero.
Yep, that lady.
Yep.
I have all of her books, but I haven't actually read them all. But I'm like, yes, I want to learn how to be a badass.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Sign me up
for that information.
Okay. And then what about you, Jill?
I'm in the middle of picking. So I actually have a book of the month membership.
Okay.
And I'm trying to decide I'm trying to decide between one that's classified as a thriller, which is my go-to, or if I want to branch out. So I'm in limbo right now, trying to decide what I want to do.
Okay. Well, good luck. It is a state of indecision for sure.
Yeah.
All right. And then Myranda.
I am also I just started Crescent City 3.
Okay.
And it's about 900 pages. So I'm going to live there for about a month.
Wow.
But I'm also in Tithe by Holly Black. So that's where I'll be for the next, month and a half.
Nice. Okay. And then why don't you guys tell the listeners what your next episode or what your next book will be for the episode. So if they want to tune in and join you, they can join you on your journey.
Well, so it's my month to pick, and we're doing a genre diversity. Oh, there it is. Genre diversity challenge. So February is romance. And I picked The Royal Runaway by what's the author? Lindsay Emery.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a Princess Diaries meets spy story.
Awesome. And then when that episode will air, you guys do the end of the month, correct? For your episode?
The last Sunday of every month is when our podcast is available on Apple and Spotify.
Okay, awesome. Well, and I'm saying this, I'm like, oh gosh, our episode's not even airing for a couple months, so we're gonna be.
It's okay.
Well, like when we do our episode, I'm like, this is gonna be this month for what they're reading.
Yeah. On our podcast or on our Instagram, you can see every month what genre we're reading.
Okay.
And we always post what book we're reading that month. So people can go on Instagram and Facebook and check what we're reading.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this. This was so fun to meet you guys in quote unquote real life and have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having us.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Jill, Myranda, and Kellye of the Bound Sisters podcast and their book flight of fantasy and romance books. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. We have something new where you can leave us a voicemail on Speakpipe. We'd love to hear from you what books you've loved from the show, what episodes have been your favorite, or a guest you've loved hearing from. Head on over to www.speakpipe.com/bookishflights to leave us a message. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.